Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Thom King is an entrepreneur, author, and self-described biohacker. Thom changed his life by adopting a ketogenic lifestyle and kicking 5 stone. In his book, Guy Gone Keto, he details an essential wellness program that will keep you fit and healthy for life. Despite achieving great success, the classic definition of success, lots of money, is not what inspires or motivates him. Thom's philosophy is you aren't doing well unless you're also doing good. And we'll ask him more about that. Thom is the founder and CEO of Stevia Brands, owned by Icon Foods, one of the largest importers, manufacturers and distributors of natural sweeteners. Thom has made it in his life's work to study food science and use his knowledge to help people eat healthier, avoid harmful sugars, and maintain diet and exercise habits that defeat metabolic disease. His company, based in Portland, Oregon, derives its name from stevia, the South American plant extract that is calorie-free, yet 300 times sweeter than sugar, and according to Thom, does not contribute to the combination of metabolic disease that Thom calls diabetes. I like that. So, Thom, welcome to the show.
Ali, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure and an honor, and I'm humbled that you would want to host me on your podcast. So, thank you so much.
Excellent. Look, I'm really excited to delve deeper into sweeteners and find out a bit more about that, because there's a lot of controversy around it. I think nowadays most people agree that, too much sugar is not a good idea. And then a lot of people have turned to sweeteners. And I think sweeteners aren't sweeteners, and I'd like to find out more about that. But before we go into it, can you give us a brief outline about, your health and fitness journey?
Well, I would say that my health and fitness journey is sort of a yo-yo type of experience. So I would say that when I got into my early 30s, that, I was having my weight go up and down and up and down. So I used like keto, and low carb and starvation to be able to, I would use it as a diet. So if I started to feel like I was getting fat, I'd go on a diet, I'd lose some weight, but then 3 or 4 months later, I'd gain that weight back because I wasn't on the diet. And so for me, I really had to commit to making keto a lifestyle rather than a diet. And I would say that I bottomed out, if you will, about 4 years ago when I was in Las Vegas at a trade show, and I went to have dinner with some customers, clients, and I just ate a steak and a potato and had cake and a bottle of wine and got back to my hotel room and looked in the mirror, and I absolutely didn't like what I saw. I was carrying about 35 pounds of extra weight. My blood pressure was through the roof. I just, I felt like an imposter, because it's like I work with all of these amazing companies that are making, ketogenic friendly products. And yet I was not living up to, to that model. So at that point in time, the pain of really the weight, and I would even say the self-worth, exceeded the pleasure that I was getting from the pizza and the pie and the wine and the beer. And, I just started writing it down, like journaling, like what the heck is going on? And a year later I had a book, and that sort of, that was the beginning of this Guy Gone Keto journey.
Interesting. And I enjoyed your book, and I liked the key lessons that you gave. And one of them was referring to body, mind, spirit. How do you what are your thoughts about body, mind, spirit when it comes to diet?
Well, I think that, one thing that people suffer from is what I call mindless munching. Just shoving food into their mouth. Is it because they're bored? Are they trying to fill a void in their life? It's sometimes like when people just mindless munch a lot of times, it's just that they're thirsty and they need to hydrate. So I really, for me, like I have practiced meditation and yoga for quite a while, and I use that as a tool to be able to keep me grounded and present. Because I think that if you are eating, if you're not engaged in what you're doing, and you're not being mindful of the practice of eating, that is where you run into a slippery slope, and where food can become more of an addiction than it is sustenance.
So bringing the mind, body, and the spirit into it makes you more conscious of eating. Is that sort of?
Yeah, I think so. And I think being involved in your food too. For me, I cook, and I yesterday was Sunday, and, Sunday is my meal prep day. So I get very involved in the preparation of my food on Sundays. I use my hands and, spices, and, and I'm very mindful and very present, while I'm making the food. And I think that if you bring in, which I think in some aspects is a spiritual, sort of a spiritual aspect of of food and eating, and you're eating mindfully, you're going to eat a lot less, because you're not using food as a distraction, but you're using food as sustenance, and you just pay honor to that food. And I think particularly when it comes to meat, because I get accused of, by some segments of the world, of all you do is eat meat and cheese, and you're making this terrible impact on the on the earth, and that couldn't be any further from the truth. And I think that the more we're involved specifically with harvesting, proteins like animal proteins, the more we're involved in that, the more you realize the sacrifice that animal made for your sustenance. And I think that if you're just, going to the grocery store and buying boxed up stuff that you don't have any involvement with, I think that takes out sort of that spiritual and mindful aspect of eating.
Interesting. I heard someone say today that if you eat meat, you should at least hunt once in your life.
I could not agree with that more. So I hunt, not often, but I hunt and I fish. And when you become intimate, with harvesting that protein like that, I mean, an animal is literally giving its life to feed you. And I mean, that's, it's a double-edged sword of both being sort of ghastly and, and being, elegant and beautiful. It's part of the food chain. So absolutely, I advocate people being hands-on and involved in if they're going to eat animals, know what's going on, and don't let any of it go to waste. Like if you have bones, use that bone to make broth. So yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
Thom, can you explain your philosophy? You aren't doing well unless you're also doing good. What do you mean?
Well, I think that if people become, myopic and just focused on making money, I'm not sure that that's healthy, healthy for that person or the world for that matter. Because you see, now it seems more than ever, people are very myopic about, about making money and being rich, and, and I don't like getting political, but, with, the president that we have now, how, it seems to be bragging about how much money he has and how many houses he owns. I think that's really, really unsatisfying. And I think what's more important is a legacy that you leave behind. If you're going to leave a legacy behind of, yeah, well, he was greedy and he had towers and golf courses and stuff like that. I mean, if that's what you want to leave behind, then, good for you. But for me, I want to leave a legacy behind that I made a difference and that I actually did good in the world. And all of my companies and all of my businesses, our focus is on how can we make the world a better place. Like our company, the sweeteners that we sell, I mean, we sell these sweeteners with companies that are reducing sugars and hopefully making, an impact on driving down metabolic disease. So I think it's important if you're going to do business and you want to do well, you absolutely have to do good as well.
So, Tom, let's talk about your business. So why did you start it?
Like I said before, I had struggled with my weight quite a bit, like going up and down, and I've always had an interest in health and nutrition. And I think it was in like 1992, I ran into this guy in Arizona, and he had just come back from Paraguay, and his name was Jim May, and he founded a company called Wisdom Naturals. And he came back with a little sachet of herbs. It was like a herb paste, and he offered it to me. He said, "Try this," and I tried it, and it was amazing. It was like 25 times sweeter than sugar, and it was just a crushed up paste with leaves. And at that point in time, a light bulb just went off over my head, and I was like, if we could find a way to naturally extract the sweet constituents from these leaves, this could be a natural version of NutraSweet or Splenda. And, that's when the journey began. Is finding a way to use just water and filtration to be able to, extract that sweetness from those leaves. So that's been my journey.
And so when you said you had a problem with food, were you addicted to sugar?
I was horribly addicted to sugar. It's like, if you read the book, so a lot of people think that my book is like, oh, it's a keto book and it's going to have recipes. It has some recipes in it, but it's really more of a confessional for me. When I was a teenager and when I was going to college, I had the worst sugar addiction. I would actually take cans of Pepsi and pour a bag of M&Ms in a can of Pepsi because it wasn't quite sweet enough for me. So I was consuming tons of sugar. I was a metabolic wreck. I'm surprised that I made it through it. So I've had my share of addictions, and sugar being one of them. And I feel pretty confident now that I've got that beat.
So are you addicted to sweeteners now?
What's interesting? I'm not. So, I would say about 6 months into, being fully, ketogenic and fat adapted, my cravings for sweets actually started to decline rapidly. Things that I had eaten in the past, like bars and, and drink mixes that I really loved. Now I can't eat them because they're too sweet. And I used to have, put a lot of stevia and sweeteners in my coffee, and I've stopped doing that. So I really feel like a ketogenic diet took away my cravings for sweets.
And yet you still think there's a niche for sweeteners?
I do. I mean, when you look at specifically in the US, when you look at the population and you look at, literally our growing population, we see adolescent obesity, and diabetes. It's still very much on the rise, and that is type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease. It means that you're eating too many carbs and too much sugar. And type 2 diabetes is still growing at an exponential level. So when you look at the popular products that are out there, like barbecue sauce and ice cream and soft drinks, there's still tons and tons of sugar in our food stream. And I do believe that, that replacing those with natural alternatives that don't affect blood sugar level, I fully believe that there's a massive market. And it's reflected in our revenue for sure.
Great. So can you tell us a bit more about sweeteners? There's obviously a lot of different types of sweeteners. Which ones should we be using? And I guess which ones do you use and why?
Well, my favorite right now is we have a product called Keto Sweet Plus, and it's a blend of stevia, monk fruit, and allulose. And allulose is a rare sugar, and it exists in figs and in other things in nature. And we've been able to take like a fructose liquid, like a fructose syrup, and add a bacteria. So think fermentation, like winemaking. So this particular enzyme or bacteria is added to, to this liquid sugar base, and the metabolite, or what's left over, is a rare sugar called allulose. And so I've done a lot of experimenting with it. I used to pull blood on a daily basis to check for blood sugar levels and ketones. And now maybe once a week or once every other week. But what I found after consuming allulose is that it actually depressed my blood sugar slightly and raised my ketones. And the science behind that is that there's residual enzymes left behind that actually block the absorption of carbohydrates. So the allulose is my go-to right now, because it's also still considered a saccharide, and a saccharide is a sugar. So it participates in what's called the Maillard effect, which is the interaction of proteins and sugar, which creates caramelization. So it also activates yeast, and which means that you could use it to make bread. So it activates your leavening. That, I would say, right now is my go-to sweetener. And the combination of stevia and monk fruit.
And okay, so you've got allulose, and then you mentioned stevia, and I think you said a stevia blend. There's actually three. Is it right that there's three types of stevia?
Well, there's really only one stevia. So stevia is the name of the plant, and within the leaves of the stevia plant exists these things called stevioglycosides, and there's 13 different primary stevioglycosides in that leaf. And one of them, there's like rhodioxide A, rhodioxide B, C, D, M, and then stevioside, and I think there's also steviodulcoside. There's all these different types of sweet components that are part of the leaf. So some of them are more popular than others. The one that is probably the most pronounced and the most sweet would be the rhodioxide A. But there more science and more research is starting to reveal that there's other components of the stevia leaf. So there's a pretty vast variety of these sweet constituents that that consumers, but mostly manufacturers, use on a consumer level. I would say the primary ones are going to be rhodioxide A or stevioside.
But sometimes you see, like, in an ingredient, like it might be stevia leaf or something like that, and it might be stevia blend. What's the difference there?
Well, the stevia leaf obviously is going to be the leaves, but a lot of the ingredient statements on food, like a food label where it lists out all the ingredients, a lot of those are mislabeled. So you can get away with saying stevia, but actually, if you're using anything other than the actual green ground up powders, you would have to label it as either stevioglycoside, rhodioxide A, or whatever the sweetener is. But stevia can be up to 300 times sweeter than sugar, so using it on its own can be challenging. There's not a lot of margin for error. So what our company does is focuses on making blends. Making blends with allulose, or making blends with alcohol sugars like erythritol. And that's when people refer to a blend, that's generally what they refer to. But I would caution your audience to be careful when buying stevia, to make sure that the blends that they're buying don't contain starches or other sugars, because commonly I see stevia extract that is mixed with maltodextrin, and maltodextrin actually has a higher glycemic impact than sugar.
Interesting. So you mentioned that these natural sweeteners don't actually raise insulin levels. What detrimental effects are there, if any?
I have not seen any effects. Um, there's a small contingency of users that that have an allergic reaction to stevia because it is a plant extract, and so if you suffer from allergies or hay fever, or you're affected by pollen, even a tiny segment of that population might get some of the same effects from stevia. But I've been doing this since 1999. Have only found two people that had an allergic reaction from it, and it wasn't severe. It was mostly like, having some allergies like you would, normally spring type allergies. So both stevia and monk fruit extract are considered GRAS, GRAS, which is a status with the FDA, meaning that it's generally regarded as safe. So there's no prescribed dosage levels for stevia or monk fruit. So I haven't heard of any adverse reactions, other than very, very rarely, like an allergy.
But quite frankly, I mean, the FDA approving it doesn't really mean that much. Are there any, I guess, good scientific studies, peer-reviewed articles or anything that you can tell us about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, stevia has been around for quite some time, and the extracts of the stevia leaf have been around for quite some time too. So and we've worked with several scientists, when we first started the business, when we were working on our extraction process, that have written several articles on the safety of stevia. So I mean, it's easy enough to to Google scientific reports regarding stevia, and you'll notice that there's not there hasn't been any legitimate negative results from any tests. I mean, there's some publicity out there, maybe perpetuated by the sugar industry, that that stevia can cause I think sterility or something like that, but that's never been peer reviewed, and I've never seen any cases of that before.
What's that? Sorry, sterility.
Yeah, but I've never seen. I think that it was maybe just anecdotal, and I've never seen any actual proof of that, or any evidence that that stevia could cause any adverse reactions whatsoever.
And is that the same with allulose?
Allulose is pretty new, so I think that we're still trying to find out, if there's any long-term effect. I've been using it for almost 5 years now and haven't found any adverse effects. One thing that I'm super mindful of is my microbiome, my gut health. And so I test my microbiome for bacteria diversity once a month, and I've dosed myself with quite a bit of allulose to see if I was getting an overpopulation of any particular bacteria in my microbiome, and I haven't seen any fluctuations whatsoever. And as far as gut health goes, I'm in the top 97.5% for diversity in my microbiome.
Interesting. And so what are the chances of, becoming addicted to natural sweeteners? And I guess what I mean by that is, when you eat sugar and then 5 minutes later you actually need more sugar, and then you need more, and there's sort of no limit to how much you need.
Right.
Are sweeteners different because of the insulin spikes, or not?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, sugar triggers the same pleasure zones in your brain as cocaine. So there's conclusive proof that if you consume sugar over a period of time, you can become dependent on it, and you can actually get an addiction. With natural sweeteners, like stevia, monk fruit, allulose, even, or erythritol like polyols, they don't trigger the same pleasure zones in the brain. And they don't trigger the same sort of metabolic reactions. So your body functions. Your primary source of fuel for your body is glucose. So if you're continually pushing glucose into your system, which is one of the components of sucrose, which is table sugar, that is what's going to trigger that that brain spike, like that high, the sugar high, as they call it. And it also, once you get an overabundance of glucose in your blood and and your body's trying to, fight that off with insulin, and you become insulin resistant, meaning that no matter how much insulin gets pumped into your system, you're not able to offset that metabolic effect of the sugar. That puts you into metabolic disease.
So how does natural sweeteners then differ to other sweeteners?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question, because I've been on some other podcasts, and one podcast in particular, I got into a disagreement with a doctor who said that, that any sweets whatsoever trigger that sort of pleasure zone, and also your body, releases insulin because it doesn't know whether it's sugar or not. But I vehemently disagree with that. I mean, I think that with natural sweeteners that exist in nature, meaning, stevia exists in nature, monk fruit exists in nature, allulose, exists in nature, polyols like erythritol exist in nature. What doesn't exist in nature is sucralose, which is the sweet component of Splenda. And also what doesn't exist in nature are sweeteners like aspartame and asulfame K, which these are chemically based artificial sweeteners that your body really doesn't know what to do with. So it doesn't recognize it as a natural compound. What it recognizes it as an unknown factor that's sweet. And so I've done actual blood tests on myself after consuming diet drinks that have had sucralose in them, and as well as aspartame, and I have seen an insulin spike from those, but I've never seen an insulin spike from stevia, monk fruit, allulose, or erythritol.
Interesting. And so tell us a bit more about your products. So I've got to say that I don't normally allow my daughter to eat tomato sauce. You can imagine the amount of sugar in tomato sauce. No. But I was very excited to have her love and try your MCT oil-infused tomato sauce. Tell us how you make that, for example, and how that differs to the regular sauce.
So ketchup, barbecue sauce, like these basic condiments that, are part of the, American diet, they contain more sugar than soda pop or ice cream. So if you're having a hamburger or French fries or whatever you're eating and you slather it with ketchup, you're basically putting, the equivalent of ice cream and candy on top of your meal. So, I mean, the way that I sort of came up with these condiments is that when I adopted a ketogenic lifestyle, I missed those condiments. I missed ketchup, I missed barbecue sauce and teriyaki sauce and steak sauce. I missed all of those, but there was too much sugar. So, I mean, I have the luxury of having access to a 3,000 square foot, lab here, at our facility, and I just made them. I just made them without sugar. I also included healthy fats, like MCT. And I think that I've noticed kids love the ketchup and they love the barbecue sauce, and that's not really my target market, but I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that they love it.
So what do you use instead of sugar for that then?
The sweetener that we used in the condiment line is a blend of allulose, stevia, and monk fruit. And we're in the process of doing some reformulation, and I think that we'll probably use allulose, erythritol, stevia, and monk fruit. So it'll be, a blend of all three of those. And what I found with that particular blend is that it's a much cleaner flavor profile.
So you're a food scientist, I believe. Is that right?
It is. I'm autodidactic in that, so I'm sort of self-taught. I've been working with high intensity sweeteners for almost 20 years. So I got very familiar with with all the applications, and I've been doing lab work for probably 15 years of that. So yeah, I call myself a food scientist, though it wasn't what I majored in college.
Okay, so you've got essentially, I guess, two different companies. Is that right? You've got a consumer company that with all these stevia type products, and then you've also got Icon Foods, which is more an ingredients based company. Where to from here, and what and why the ingredients side of things?
Well, it's actually three companies.
Okay.
So we do have Steviva brands, which is our consumer line of sweeteners, and then Icon Foods, which is which is all ingredient. And then the book that I wrote that came out last May called Guy Gone Keto, that is another consumer line of ketogenic condiments. So it's three companies. And so when you say where from here, I really enjoy formulating, ketogenic products, and I do it for a lot of customers, and I foresee that we're going to continue to expand the Guy Gone Keto line, and I'll keep formulating and reformulating, companies' products to reduce sugars. I mean, that's my passion, and that's what I do.
Great. So how do people buy the products?
Well, if you want sweeteners, you could go to steviva.com, and that's S as in Sierra, TEVIVA.com. If you're interested in the condiments and you want to see, what this whole keto thing's about, you can go to guygoneketo.com. And if you're into science and you want to see some sciencey stuff, stop by Icon Foods, and you can see what we've got going on in our lab and what kind of ingredients that we offer food manufacturers. And
so who do you typically sell to in the Icon Foods ingredients line?
That's a really great question. So, I mean, anytime that we start engaging with a customer, one of the first things that we do is we sign non-disclosure agreements, because a lot of our customers like to keep their suppliers and confidential. So I can't really name off any brands, but what I can tell you, if you've ever had a protein bar, or if you've ever had any type of a ketogenic product that's sweet, or powdered drink mixes, then you've had some of our products. Excellent. I didn't know it was a secret, but that's secret.
That's great. Look, Thom, you're very insightful, and you've obviously had and still do have a journey of your own in terms of fitness and health. One thing I didn't ask you about, but which I'd like to know more about, is your fitness. What do you do for exercise and movement?
That's another great question. So I generally try to get up in the morning between 4:30 and 5, and I enjoy what I call my hour of power. And in that hour of power, I start off with journaling. So I journal every single morning. I never miss that. Then I go for a 3.5 mile run. I do cycling, rowing, TRX, dumbbells. And then, I do some boxing. So I do a speed bag and a punching bag. But I do something every single day. And I think that, I think that's super important, and I'm over 50. So keeping my joints and keeping my flexibility is super important. I also incorporate a lot of stretching and a lot of yoga, but I think that it's critically important that every single person engage in some sort of fitness or some sort of physical activity on a daily basis.
Interesting. And I know you just got back from FitCon, so I'd love to ask you what your thoughts are in terms of the future when it comes to, I guess, fitness and health and where things are heading. I know it's a fairly broad question, but especially maybe in the nutrition line, I'm sure you've had a lot of thought about it as well, in terms of big companies, small companies. I guess you've seen a lot of change recently where a lot of smaller companies are being bought out by big companies because they're realizing the importance of healthy food. Where do you think things are heading?
Well, I think things are going to continue in the direction of companies, of bigger consumer product companies buying out smaller ones. I mean, our booth is right next to Mark Sisson, right next to Mark Sisson's booth, Primal Kitchen, and I know they sold to Kraft about 6 months ago for $200 million. So I think you're going to see, bigger companies trying to get into the paleo and ketogenic categories, which I totally support. But I think you're going to be seeing a lot of this because with the legacy brands, like Kraft and Heinz, that have built their empires off of, of products that have, a lot of sugar in them and are not necessarily clean. You're going to see, I think it's more of a challenge for those companies to be able to shift their legacy brands than it is for them to go out and just buy market share by buying smaller brands that are, that are using clean label, ingredients and targeting a paleo and Whole30 and ketogenic market.
So overall, you think it's a good thing because then I guess more clients, more public get exposed to it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a double-edged sword. I mean, I've seen companies buy, cleaner companies or, more natural companies. Like I would say one example was when Kellogg's bought out Kashi and then stopped using organic. And immediately all the Kashi eaters just abandoned the brand. And I think that's a good lesson. And I think that a lot of these larger consumer brands realize that now, that if you're going to buy a smaller brand that targets a more natural market, that integrity is critical. And I think that with millennials and the Gen Z demographic, that company integrity is key. I think that you will definitely see a shift in these larger legacy brands. I think you're going to start seeing a shift towards more integrity with the ingredients that they're using.
Excellent. Look, on I guess a bit of a personal advice note, I'd love to ask you a tip for our listeners who potentially have gone through a similar thing to yourself, in that you sort of dieted on and off like a yo-yo. What was it that really triggered you, or what was it that really made you go? I mean, I guess you've explained what it was, but what advice could you give to someone that's sort of in that spot, that knows that they need to actually commit to a lifestyle?
Use the pain that you have as leverage. For me, to adopt a ketogenic lifestyle, it took a lot of discipline, because it's easy, particularly when you look at, social activities, because social activities are usually, hey, let's go grab a bite to eat, or hey, let's go get a drink. So, I mean, it takes a ton of discipline to be able to go out for drinks with your friends and not drink, or have something that falls into the low carb keto, category, like something with just soda, no sweet beverages. So I think that the biggest take home is find that discipline. There's no hacks. There's no workaround. There's no simple way to do this. It really requires discipline, and it requires a routine that you do on a daily basis. So if you feel like you're failing, good. Leverage that pain of failing into driving you into being a success with it. And for me, when I started this ketogenic journey, it was in Vegas, and I went out to dinner with some customers and ate a steak and a potato and wine and cake, and went back up to my room and looked in the mirror. I was carrying 35 pounds of extra weight, and I'm like, this is it. This is it. I can't live like this anymore. I know that's not a ton of weight, but everybody's gauge is different. And at that point, the pain of that extra weight and my poor health and my high blood pressure exceeded the pleasure that I was deriving from overeating and eating pizza and drinking wine and beer and living sort of a slothful lifestyle. So I would say feel the pain, embrace the pain. Suffering is optional, but leverage that into making a lifestyle change.
Awesome. I love that. That's great. And last question I have for you, Thom, just slightly random. I ask all my guests on the show, do you have a tattoo?
I had a tattoo. So I got a tattoo. When I was either 17 or 18. I went out with a friend of mine and I came back with a tattoo, and my mom cried and she's, my baby's got a tattoo. So I had a tattoo. And I got it when I was younger. It wasn't a very good tattoo. It was a heart with wings on it. And then it started to fade, and it was before they had laser. So I actually went to a doctor and had it cut off of my arm. And the doctor, it was not ideal. So the doctor was like smoking a cigarette while he was carving at my arm. So no, I don't have any tattoos currently. The tattoo that I had sits in a jar of formaldehyde. Wow.
But you've got a nice chunk in your arm, love heart shaped with wings.
I guess I do have a tattoo of sorts.
That's great. Look, Thom, thanks again. We're going to put all of this in the show notes so people can check out your products and learn more about natural sweeteners.
Great. Allie, thank you so much for having me on. Really, really great questions. And yeah, if you're a listener out there, go out and support this podcast. Give it 5 stars. It's super important.
Cool. Thanks, Thom.
You're welcome.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ally.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.